Well, it's the news we have been waiting for. Ohio Senator JD Vance has been selected by Donald Trump as his vice president.
This is an announcement on Truth Social by former President Trump. He has selected Ohio Senator JD Vance as his vice presidential pick, and this is what he writes. After lengthy deliberation and thought, and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is JD Vance of the great state of Ohio.
Joining me now is Newsweek Senior Editor-at-Large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, great to see you. Look, it was only a few months ago you actually made the case for JD Vance. Tell us a bit about him and why you think he is indeed the best pick to be Trump's running mate.
Yeah, look, I am thrilled. I am absolutely overjoyed. I am over the moon for someone who I've considered to be a friend for a few years now, which is JD Vance. And it's not just that he's a personal friend. He actually also happens to be the very best pick that Donald Trump could have made at this precise moment. So let me explain why that is the case. If you go from 2016 to 2020 and you compare Trump's exit polling from one election to the next, he actually made inroads in basically every demographic imaginable, whether it's blacks, Latinos, young voters, immigrants, essentially every demographic, other than the demographic that actually delivered him the 2016 election. White, working class, and middle class voters, especially in the heartland, in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt areas, places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the voters who came out in droves to deliver those three key Midwestern states to Donald Trump in 2016. JD Vance is the guy who literally wrote the best-selling book Hillbilly Elegy. He is the guy who can bring those voters back to home on the campaign trail. He's also someone who was only 39 years old. I'm 35. We're both millennials. JD speaks, I think, to our generation's frustrations with how our prior generations, how the boomers, frankly, have really sold out younger Americans when it comes to the neoliberal agenda, when it comes to free trade as a value unto itself. But, it happens to be that trade comes at the expense of manufacturing, of resilient supply chains, and good, well-paying jobs here on the home front. It happens to be that those neoliberal elites of the boomer generation have engaged in all sorts of feckless boondoggles overseas and on a foreign policy stage here. JD Vance is a very eloquent spokesman for those particular causes there. He's also just in line with where the party is right now. He is the man for the moment. His views on the future of the right, on the future of American conservatism, on the future of all the major issues, immigration, trade, foreign policy, political economy. He is in touch. He has his finger on the pulse, and he's very, very, very well spoken on the campaign trail as well. He's the right pick, and again, I'm just so personally thrilled at this.
Look, I think you're right as well about that youth factor because he brings something different to the table. I've got to say, Josh, it's interesting because it hasn't always been smooth sailing for JD Vance and Trump. He once called him America's Hitler, but here is JD Vance admitting that he was wrong about the former president.
I didn't think he was going to be a good president, Brett. He was a great president, and it's one of the reasons why I'm working so hard to make sure he gets a second term. I think you should. When you're wrong about something, you should change your mind and be honest with people about that fact.
Josh, is JD Vance a bit of a secret weapon almost because he's about to convert more people like he had to himself?
Yeah, I find that very relatable because it's very similar to my own trajectory. So back in 2016 in the Republican presidential primary, I was just graduating law school at the time. I was a very outspoken supporter at the time of Senator Ted Cruz's presidential campaign. And I actually got a shout out in his Iowa caucus victory speech. I was very active in the Ted Cruz campaign. And I also had a very harsh language for Donald Trump at that time. I don't think I literally called him America's Hitler, but there were many of us who were caught up in the moment. It was a very important presidential primary. It was a very important election in 2016. And like JD Vance and like so many others, I have been won over. Donald Trump had a very successful 4 years as president. Did he make mistakes? Sure. I would not have handled COVID-19 lockdowns and vaccines, for instance, the exact same way that he did. But by and large, he was an extraordinarily successful president. The world was very stable. It was peaceful. There were no major wars at that time. The economy was thriving. The black unemployment rate here in America reached its absolute lowest number in the entire history of that statistic. The economy was roaring. The stock market was soaring. I could go on and on here. So at this point, who cares? Really, seriously, who cares what you said 8 years ago? It matters whether or not you are a passionate supporter of the president's agenda right now. And JD Vance clearly is that.